On February 13th, 2024, a father arrived at his daughter's home in Switzerland after she failed to pick up her children from kindergarten. While the husband claimed not to know where she was, something felt wrong. The father searched the house and made a discovery in the basement that would shock an entire nation. His daughter, a former Miss Switzerland finalist and successful businesswoman, was dead. What Swiss authorities would uncover over the next 10 months was a case so calculated, so cold-blooded, that the courts would describe it as displaying a remarkably high level of criminal energy and lack of empathy. Kristina Joksimovic was the embodiment of grace, beauty, and success. At 38 years old, she had built a life that many would envy, a life filled with accomplishment, purpose, and the love of her two young daughters. Kristina first stepped into the public eye in 2007 when she was crowned Miss Northwest Switzerland. Her poise, intelligence, and natural charisma carried her forward to become a finalist in the prestigious Miss Switzerland competition. But unlike many who fade from the spotlight after their pageant days end, Kristina used her platform as a launching pad for something more meaningful. She established herself as a highly sought-after catwalk coach and mentor, founding her own successful coaching business. Kristina didn't just teach young women how to walk a runway, she taught them confidence, professional techniques, and the mindset needed to succeed in the competitive world of modeling. Her approach was transformative, helping aspiring models see their own potential and develop the skills to achieve their dreams. Among her most notable achievements was mentoring Dominique Rinderknecht for the Miss Universe 2013 competition. It was a testament to Kristina's expertise and reputation that competitors at the highest levels sought her guidance. Friends and colleagues universally described her as a beautiful and kind-hearted woman, someone whose inner qualities matched her outer grace. By 2024, Kristina was living in Binningen, a peaceful area near Basel, Switzerland. She shared a home with her husband, Thomas, a 43-year-old man, and their two young daughters. To the outside world, they appeared to be the picture-perfect family. Kristina maintained an active social media presence, sharing glimpses of their life together. Just 4 weeks before her death, she had posted photos from a romantic getaway at a luxury hotel, images that showed a couple seemingly happy and in love. But as investigators would later discover, the glossy exterior of their life together concealed a much darker reality. Kristina's husband had a history of violence, something that friends and family may not have fully understood until it was too late. The contrast between their public image and private reality was stark and devastating. Kristina was a devoted mother who maintained routines and responsibilities with precision. She was the type of person who showed up when expected, who fulfilled her commitments, who never left her children waiting. On February 13th, 2024, when Kristina failed to pick up her daughters from kindergarten, everyone who knew her understood immediately that something was terribly wrong. Kristina would never voluntarily abandon her children or leave them wondering where their mother was. That deviation from her character, that single missed pickup, would be the alarm that set in motion the discovery of a crime so brutal and methodical that it would capture international attention and force Switzerland to confront uncomfortable questions about domestic violence, even in seemingly perfect families. When Kristina didn't arrive at the kindergarten to collect her daughters on February 13th, concerned school staff contacted family members. Kristina's father, growing increasingly worried, decided to go to his daughter's home in Binningen to check on her. When he arrived at the residence, Thomas was at the house, but his behavior raised immediate red flags. He claimed he didn't know where Kristina was, suggesting she might have gone somewhere, but his demeanor seemed off, distracted, evasive. Kristina's father knew his daughter well enough to know that she would never leave her children waiting without communication, without explanation. Unsatisfied with Thomas's vague responses and driven by a father's intuition that something was deeply wrong, he began searching the premises himself. The house appeared normal at first, but he continued looking, checking rooms, opening doors, trying to find any clue about where his daughter might be. Eventually, he made his way to the basement laundry room. Court documents would later describe this space as isolated and bunker-like, a place removed from the main living areas of the home. There he discovered a large black trash bag that seemed out of place. When he opened it, he saw blonde hair, and in that horrifying moment, he realized he was looking at his daughter's remains. The trauma of that discovery is unimaginable. A father searching for his missing daughter, hoping against hope that she was simply away or unable to answer her phone, instead finding evidence that she had been killed. Police were immediately called to the scene. Swiss authorities arrested Thomas on the spot. The investigation that followed would reveal that Christina had been killed by strangulation. The autopsy confirmed that she died from compression of the neck, a method that requires sustained effort and intent. There was no accident here, no spontaneous moment of passion. This was deliberate murder, but the strangulation was only the beginning of what investigators would uncover. What happened after Christina's death, the steps Thomas allegedly took to dispose of her body would prove so calculated and methodical that forensic experts and prosecutors would struggle to comprehend the level of criminal intent required. Swiss police immediately secured the scene and began what would become a nearly 10-month investigation. The complexity of the case was evident from the start. Investigators faced the challenge of reconstructing what had happened while dealing with evidence that had been deliberately concealed and manipulated under Swiss privacy laws. The suspect could only be identified as Thomas, his first name, protecting his identity while the investigation and legal proceedings moved forward. This is standard practice in Swiss criminal cases, quite different from the public identification common in American investigations. Forensic teams worked meticulously to document the crime scene and collect evidence. The basement laundry room became a focal point of the investigation, with experts spending hours cataloging what they found and what it revealed about the sequence of events. Thomas was taken into custody and interrogated. During these initial interviews, his story began to shift and change in ways that immediately raised investigators' suspicions. When a suspect's account of events keeps evolving, when new details emerge, or previous claims are contradicted, it often signals deception. Thomas' inability to provide a consistent narrative would become a critical factor in the case against him. As the investigation progressed, forensic experts worked to establish exactly what had happened to Christina Joksimovic after her death. The autopsy report and subsequent court documents revealed details that shocked even experienced investigators and prosecutors. What they uncovered suggested not just a murder, but what the courts would later describe as ritualized degradation. The forensic analysis determined that after strangling Christina, Thomas had moved her body to the basement laundry room. What happened next demonstrated what prosecutors called a remarkably high level of criminal energy. The evidence suggested that Thomas had spent significant time attempting to dispose of his wife's body in ways that went far beyond simply concealing evidence. Court documents detailed that the process involved dismemberment and efforts to destroy remains through various means. The methodical nature of these actions, the time and planning they required, painted a picture of someone acting with cold calculation rather than panic. Investigators noted that this level of sustained effort to dispose of a body is extremely rare and suggests a particular psychological profile. Perhaps most disturbingly, court documents revealed that Thomas had been watching videos on his phone during the process. This detail struck investigators as particularly chilling, suggesting a level of detachment and lack of empathy that bordered on the incomprehensible. Most people struggle to fathom how someone could engage in such actions while simultaneously watching content on their phone, as if this were just another mundane task. The Swiss Federal Supreme Court would later note in their legal assessment that the nature of what was done to Christina's body showed characteristics of ritualized behavior, suggesting possible mental disorder, alongside what they termed sadistic sociopathic traits. The court emphasized that the suspect displayed a significant propensity for violence and a complete lack of remorse. As investigators dug deeper into Thomas and Christina's relationship history, they uncovered evidence that contradicted the picture perfect family image they had presented to the world. Thomas had a prior history of violence. Information that would prove crucial to understanding the dynamics of their marriage. Friends and family members, when interviewed, began to share concerns they had harbored, but perhaps not fully voiced when Christina was alive. The investigation also focused on establishing a timeline. When exactly had Christina died? The last confirmed sighting was when she was supposed to pick up her children. Working backward from that point, investigators attempted to determine when Thomas had killed her and how long he had spent attempting to dispose of evidence before her father arrived at the house. The gap between the murder and the discovery was relatively short, likely only hours. This fact made Thomas's actions even more remarkable from an investigative standpoint. The amount of deliberate effort expended in such a compressed time frame suggested someone acting with determination and focus, not someone in a state of panic or emotional distress. Prosecutors also examined Thomas's behavior when Christina's father arrived at the house. His claim that he did not know where she was, his apparent distraction, his failure to call emergency services or report her missing himself, All of these factors undermined any potential claim that this had been an accident or that he had acted in some form of self-defense. Legal experts who would later analyze the case pointed out a critical factor that criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Safa Robinson Ferrer emphasized. While defendants sometimes attempt to argue self-defense in domestic violence cases, it becomes nearly impossible to maintain that claim when extensive post-death actions are involved. The effort required to dispose of a body, particularly when done methodically over an extended period, suggests to investigators and juries that the initial killing was equally intentional. The 10-month gap between Thomas's arrest in February 2024 and the formal filing of charges in December 2024 reflected the complex forensic and toxicological work. Required prosecutors needed to build an ironclad case that could prove not just that Thomas had killed his wife, but that he had done so with intent, and that his subsequent actions demonstrated consciousness of guilt and a disturbing psychological profile. To understand how the murder of Kristina Joksimovic could happen, investigators had to look beyond the immediate crime and examine the relationship dynamics that had led to this tragic outcome. What they discovered was a classic case of domestic violence hidden behind a facade of success and normalcy. Domestic violence exists in all socioeconomic levels, in all communities, and often in the places where people least expect it. Kristina and Thomas appeared to live a privileged life in an affluent area of Switzerland. They had resources, social standing, and the appearance of stability. But as experts in domestic violence know well, these factors provide no protection against abuse. In fact, they can sometimes make it harder for victims to seek help or for others to recognize the warning signs. The pattern that emerged from the investigation suggested a relationship where control and violence had been escalating over time. Thomas's prior history of violence indicated this was not a single incident born from a unique circumstance, but rather the culmination of ongoing patterns of abusive behavior. Friends and family members looking back after Kristina's death began to recognize signs they might have missed or minimized at the time. One of the most insidious aspects of domestic violence is how well abusers can compartmentalize their behavior. Thomas appeared capable of maintaining a public persona as a family man while allegedly engaging in violent behavior behind closed doors. This dual nature, what some might call a Jekyll and Hyde personality, is extremely common in domestic violence cases. The abuser can be charming, successful, and seemingly normal in public settings, while exercising control and violence in private. The fact that Kristina maintained her successful career, her social connections, and her public presence while allegedly experiencing domestic violence is also consistent with how many victims navigate these situations. They maintain normalcy, they protect their family's image, and they may even convince themselves that things are not as bad as they might appear to others. The photos Kristina posted just 4 weeks before her death showing a romantic getaway may have represented her hope that things were improving, or they may have been part of the carefully maintained facade that hid the reality of her situation. Investigators and domestic violence experts who reviewed the case noted that strangulation is a particularly significant form of violence in domestic abuse situations. Research has shown that when an abuser strangles their partner, it dramatically increases the likelihood that they will eventually kill them. Strangulation is about power and control taken to an extreme level. It is an intensely personal form of violence that requires the perpetrator to be physically close to the victim to look at them to maintain pressure for an extended period until death occurs. It is not a crime of momentary rage, it is a sustained act. The methodical nature of what allegedly happened after Kristina's death also provided insight into Thomas's psychological state. The Swiss Federal Supreme Court's assessment that he exhibited sadistic sociopathic traits and significant propensity for violence was based not just on the killing itself, but on everything that followed. The court noted that the actions demonstrated a remarkably high level of criminal energy, the kind of sustained effort and planning that suggests someone operating with cold logic rather than emotional response. Court documents describing the crime used the term ritualized degradation, suggesting that the actions taken went beyond simple body disposal and reflected a particular psychology. This assessment, combined with the court's suggestion that Thomas may suffer from a mental disorder, paints a picture of someone whose capacity for empathy and normal human connection may have been fundamentally impaired or absent. For Kristina's family, learning these details about what had happened to their daughter, sister, and mother was devastating beyond measure. The grief of losing a loved one to murder is already overwhelming, but learning the specific circumstances of her death, the extent of the violence, and the calculated nature of the crime added layers of trauma that will likely never fully heal. The impact on Christina's two young daughters cannot be overstated. They lost their mother to violence committed by their father. They will grow up knowing not just that their mother died, but how she died and who was responsible for her. Miss Switzerland, Krista Rigozzi, commenting on the case, expressed particular devastation about the tragedy for these two children who now face a lifetime of processing this trauma. Throughout the investigation, Thomas' story changed multiple times, a classic indicator of deception that prosecutors would later use to demonstrate consciousness of guilt. His evolving narrative revealed someone scrambling to construct a believable explanation for the inexplicable. Initially, when Christina's father arrived at the house, Thomas claimed he simply did not know where his wife was. He suggested she might have gone somewhere, maintaining ignorance about her whereabouts even as her body was concealed in the basement. This first story was transparently false, contradicted immediately by the discovery of Christina's remains on the property. Confronted with undeniable evidence, Thomas shifted to his second story. He claimed he had simply found Christina dead, suggesting he had no involvement in her death but discovered her deceased and panicked. This claim did not hold up under forensic scrutiny, as the evidence clearly indicated this was a homicide, not a natural death or accident. Finally, in March 2024, Thomas admitted to killing Christina but claimed he had acted in self-defense. According to this version, Christina had allegedly attacked him with a knife, and he had defended himself with the strangulation occurring during this defensive struggle. He claimed everything that happened afterward was done in a state of panic. This self-defense claim became the focus of intense forensic examination. Experts conducted thorough analysis looking for any evidence that would support Thomas' account of being attacked. They looked for defensive wounds on his body, examined the scene for signs of a struggle consistent with his story, and analyzed Christina's body for evidence that she had been the aggressor. The results were clear and definitive. Forensic experts found no evidence whatsoever of self-defense. The medical examination confirmed the cause of death was strangulation, and the circumstances did not match a defensive struggle. There were no knife wounds on Thomas consistent with defending himself from an attack. The physical evidence contradicted his claim at every turn. Legal experts noted that the extensive post-death actions also severely undermined any self-defense claim. As attorney Safa Robinson Ferrer pointed out, it is extremely difficult to argue you acted in panicked self-defense when you then spend hours methodically disposing of the body. The calculated nature of the disposal efforts suggested the initial killing was equally calculated. Someone truly acting in self-defense would call emergency services, not spend hours concealing evidence. In December 2025, nearly 10 months after Christina's father made that horrific discovery in the basement, Swiss authorities officially filed formal charges against Thomas. He was charged with murder and with disturbing the peace of the dead, a separate criminal offense under Swiss law related to the desecration of human remains. The Swiss Federal Supreme Court reviewed Thomas' request for release from custody while awaiting trial. Their decision to deny this request came with a detailed assessment of the defendant and the crime that left no doubt about how seriously they viewed this case. The court language was unusually strong and direct. They described Thomas as displaying sadistic, sociopathic traits and a significant propensity for violence. They noted his remarkably high level of criminal energy, lack of empathy, and cold-bloodedness in committing the crime. The court emphasized that the nature of what had been done to Christina's body suggested possible mental disorder combined with a complete absence of remorse. Based on this assessment, the court determined that Thomas posed a continued danger and denied his release. He remains in custody as the case moves toward trial, where he will face the full weight of the Swiss criminal justice system. The charges of murder and disturbing the peace of the dead carry severe penalties under Swiss law. If convicted, Thomas faces life imprisonment, which in Switzerland typically means a minimum of 15 years before parole eligibility. Though in cases of exceptional severity, life can truly mean life. The formal charging marked a critical milestone in the case, bringing some measure of forward movement toward justice for Christina, her family, and her two daughters who will grow up without their mother. The murder of Christina Joksimovic sent shockwaves through Switzerland and gained international media attention, forcing conversations about domestic violence that many communities would prefer to avoid. For Christina's family, particularly her parents and her two young daughters, The path forward is unimaginably difficult. They must navigate grief, trauma, and the public nature of this tragedy while trying to protect the children from the full horror of what happened to their mother. Former Miss Switzerland Krista Rigozzi spoke for many when she expressed devastation about the impact on these two young girls. The case highlights a critical reality about domestic violence. It happens in all communities at all socioeconomic levels and often behind closed doors where others cannot see or intervene. The picture-perfect family image that Christina and Thomas projected to the world concealed a deadly reality. Domestic violence experts emphasize that cases like this, while extreme, represent the far end of a continuum of abusive behavior. Strangulation, in particular, is recognized as a significant warning sign that an abusive relationship may turn deadly. Yet, many people, including victims themselves, may not recognize the escalating danger until it is too late. The contrast between Christina's public success and private victimization serves as a reminder that domestic violence does not discriminate. A woman, beauty, intelligence, professional success, or social standing provides no protection against an abusive partner. As this case moves toward trial, it stands as a tragic reminder of why domestic violence awareness, intervention, and prevention remain critical social priorities.